I, 24M, had one of those graduations people talk about forever, but not for the reasons you'd expect. I'd spent the last 4 years grinding through college, scraping by on scholarships and part-time jobs, living in a tiny studio that barely fit my bed and textbooks. I wasn't the most popular guy in my class, not exactly Mr. Social Butterfly, but I'd managed to keep my GPA high enough to make my parents pretend they were proud. Or at least that's what I thought. The day started normal enough. Caps, gowns, the awkward, slow-moving line of families trying to snap pictures of their kids. I felt a little buzz of excitement, not like I'd won the lottery, but enough to know that the sleepless nights, the ramen dinners, the $1,200 textbooks that felt like an assault on my bank account, all of it was finally paying off. And then there was my dad. He had this way of showing up just in time to ruin the moment without even trying. He wasn't a violent guy, not really. But he had this sharp tongue, the kind that sticks in your head long after it's been spoken. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk plastered on his face like he was in on some joke I wasn't. And just as the ceremony was picking up pace, right when the speaker was talking about new beginnings and building your future, he shouted, loud enough that half the people in the section turned. Don't get too excited. Degrees don't pay bills. I froze. For a second, the words felt like they slammed into me physically. My chest tightened, my palms went sweaty, and I could feel every eye around me flicking between him and me. Some kids tried to laugh awkwardly, thinking it was some dumb dad joke. My mom, poor thing, looked mortified, her hand over her mouth like she wanted to sink into her seat and disappear. I didn't respond. I didn't shout back. I didn't roll my eyes or make a sarcastic comment. I just kept my jaw tight and nodded at the person handing me my diploma. Inside, though, my brain was on fire. I wanted to yell. I wanted to storm off. I wanted to punch him right in the arm, but I didn't. Not then. Because something clicked in me that day. I realized I didn't need his approval. I didn't need him to validate the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into 4 years of my life. After the ceremony, while everyone else was celebrating with champagne and selfies, I found myself outside, leaning against the brick wall of the auditorium, scrolling through my phone, trying to convince myself I wasn't still shaking. I could hear my dad in the distance, talking loudly to his friends, basically retelling the degrees don't pay bills line like he had just dropped the funniest one-liner of the century. I wanted to disappear. For months after graduation, that line haunted me. Every job rejection, every late rent notice, every time I had to work a double shift at the coffee shop to make ends meet, his words echoed. I won't lie, I hated him for it. But I also used it. Every setback became fuel. Every time someone doubted me, I remembered that day. That stupid, humiliating, unforgettable day. So yeah, in a way, he gave me the fire I didn't even know I had. And trust me, I was about to turn it into something he would never forget. So, after graduation, reality hit harder than I expected. No fairy tale job offers. No congratulations, here's a 6-figure starting salary, emails. Just me, my laptop, and a pile of student loans that made my stomach twist every time I thought about them. I took the first real job I could get, an entry-level analyst position at a small consulting firm in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous. The office smelled faintly of old coffee and desperation. My desk was wedged between a printer that jammed constantly and a window that faced a brick wall. But it was a start. From day one, I threw myself into it. I didn't just want to do the job, I wanted to master it. I learned the ins and outs of the software, memorized clients' quirks, and stayed late, way past the point most people had given up and gone home. I wasn't just working for a paycheck. I was building leverage, a skill set, a reputation. Every time I felt like quitting, I remembered that graduation day. My dad's smirk, his loud, cruel words. Degrees don't pay bills. He made me feel small, but he also made me hungry. I started noticing patterns in business that no one else did, or maybe they just didn't care enough to see. I read everything I could get my hands on about finance, marketing, and management. Some nights, I barely slept. I'd lie in bed thinking about ways to improve client portfolios or streamline operations. My friends from college were out having fun, posting Instagram stories at rooftop bars, traveling, living the graduated and free life. Me? I was grinding, and honestly, it felt lonely, but also necessary. Around year 2, I got a hint of what it would feel like to really succeed. One of the firm's bigger clients, a regional chain of auto repair shops, was struggling with mismanagement and declining profits. Most senior analysts wrote it off as a lost cause. I saw an opportunity. I spent nights analyzing their operations, suggesting process improvements, cost reductions, and marketing strategies. I drafted presentations that were too detailed for most of my coworkers, but exactly what the client needed. The client loved it. They asked for me by name. That tiny victory lit something in me, like a preview of the power I could actually hold if I kept pushing. Meanwhile, my dad's business, a small manufacturing company he'd inherited from his father, was struggling. He complained constantly about kids these days not wanting to work, about the economy, about clients being impossible. Every time he vented, I didn't respond. I just filed it away mentally, taking notes. I started researching the industry, understanding his company from the outside in. Not because I liked him or wanted to impress him, because I was already planning my long game. By the third year, I had moved up to senior analyst. I had savings. I had contacts. I had confidence. And most importantly, I had vision. I started looking for opportunities to invest, to buy into companies that were undervalued. It wasn't reckless or flashy. It was calculated, methodical, and relentless. And every step I took, every bit of money I saved, every contract I landed, felt like I was stacking bricks towards something bigger. Something that would make my dad's words echo back at him. But this time, with consequences. People at work started noticing my ambition. Colleagues whispered about my dedication. Supervisors nudged me toward leadership roles. I didn't just want to climb the ladder. I wanted to build my own ladder, one that reached over everything my dad thought he knew about success. Every time he said something smug on the phone, I'd hear it in my head, loud as that graduation auditorium. Degrees don't pay bills. Yeah, well, I was about to pay a lot more than bills. By year 4, I had a modest investment portfolio, some small business acquisitions, and a growing reputation in the industry. But I didn't tell anyone, not even my mom. I didn't need validation from friends or coworkers. I only needed proof, for me, and eventually, for him. I wanted him to see that the kid he dismissed, the unrealistic dreamer, was actually making moves he couldn't even imagine. And the more I succeeded, the more I realized something important. I didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge. I wanted it because it was the ultimate validation. Not a punchline, not a viral moment. Real, tangible, undeniable proof that his small-mindedness wasn't just wrong, it was outdated. That's when I started paying serious attention to his company. I knew enough now about business, finance, and negotiation to make a move. I just had to wait for the right moment, be smart, be strategic. I wasn't thinking about shouting in his face or humiliating him publicly. That would be childish. This was about power, about leverage, about finally flipping the narrative. One day, I would walk into a room where he thought he was the boss, and everything would change. And honestly, I couldn't wait for that day. Not out of hate, but out of the satisfaction of proving to myself, and him, that I had been building something real all along. So yeah, those 4 years post-graduation were brutal, lonely, exhausting, but they were mine. Every dollar earned, every hour worked, every sleepless night was a step towards something bigger. And by the time year 5 rolled around, I was ready to make my first move. By the 5th year, I was in a place I never imagined I'd be at 24. Not rich by any stretch, but financially stable enough to make moves my younger self could only dream about. I had enough savings, investments, and business contacts to seriously consider my next step, and that step involved my dad. I hadn't seen him in a while, not really. Calls were minimal, awkward, filled with his subtle digs or complaints about life. I played it cool, acting like I was busy with work, which, honestly, I was. But inside, I was running calculations, thinking about how to approach this strategically. I didn't want to just confront him. I wanted to flip the power dynamic completely. It started with research. I dug into his company, going through public records, financial statements, supplier contracts. I spoke to people in the industry casually, asking questions without revealing anything. The more I learned, the more obvious it became. His business was undervalued, mismanaged in places, and ripe for an outsider with fresh ideas and capital. Me. I started quietly accumulating shares where I could, making low-profile moves that wouldn't alert him. He still thought of me as that aimless kid with a degree that didn't pay bills. Meanwhile, I was literally planning the moment when I would prove him wrong in the most undeniable way possible. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those nights he had mocked my useless degree. All those dinners where he compared me to some cousin or neighbor who actually made something of themselves had fueled this obsession. Not just revenge, but validation. Proof that I could take the things he cared about, power, money, respect, and claim them on my terms. Then came the first serious conversation with him after years of minimal contact. I had arranged a casual lunch, just me, him, and my mom. He arrived, looking smug as always, scanning me like he was checking for signs of failure. I smiled politely, keeping my tone light, letting him do the talking while I observed. You know, it's good you've got a job and all, he started. But remember, degrees don't pay bills. I let it hang there for a moment, sipping my water, nodding as if I was absorbing sage advice. Inside, I was calculating, waiting. Yeah, I said finally, almost casual. That's true. Bills are one thing, but opportunity, that's another. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing yet, I said, smiling. Just thinking about the future, you know? Over the next few months, I made my move. Quietly, strategically, I began buying more significant stakes in his company through a private investment firm. My contacts helped me structure it, so he wouldn't notice until it was too late. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. I didn't need anyone else to see it. I just needed leverage. And by the end of the year, I held a controlling interest in his business. Sitting in my apartment after the final transaction went through, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, relief, and a little disbelief. I had done it. I had taken the company he ran for years and was now in a position to call the shots. And all without a single raised voice or public humiliation. Just strategy, patience, and focus. The day I told him, I arranged another meeting. This time, it was in his office. He walked in, expecting the usual small talk, maybe a bit of condescension toward his son with a degree that didn't pay bills. He had no idea. I handed him the papers showing the transfer of control. I watched as confusion, then shock, washed over his face. For the first time, the smug smirk disappeared. What is this?" he stammered. I leaned back, calm, measured. "You remember your advice at my graduation? Degrees don't pay bills." I let the words sink in. "Well, now they do. For me. And I just bought your business. Controlling interest. Full authority. Welcome to the future." He froze, muttering something about lawyers and mistakes, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of arguing. I just smiled, let the reality of the situation settle around him. Years of belittling, of underestimating, had all led to this one moment. And I didn't need to raise my voice to win. After he left, stunned, I called my mom. Her voice cracked with emotion when I told her what I'd done. "I can't believe it," she said. "All those years and now you did it." It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, about showing myself that I could take someone's doubts and turn them into fuel. I had turned humiliation into strategy, mocking into motivation. And the satisfaction? Indescribable. By the time I hung up, I realized something important. I didn't need him to respect me. I didn't need a pat on the back. I had achieved something real, tangible, and undeniable. And honestly, I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just a quiet, powerful satisfaction. The degrees don't pay bills line, once a dagger in my chest, now echoed differently. It had been my challenge, my motivation, my fire. And I had harnessed it fully, brilliantly. I'll never forget the first time I saw the panic in my dad's eyes after I officially took control of his business. He had always carried himself like he owned the world, like he could bend situations to his favor with a grin and a few sharp words. And now, he walked into his own office, the place he'd ruled for decades, only to realize that I was holding the leash. It started subtly. He tried to mask it at first, acting like everything was fine, like he still had some semblance of authority. "I don't know what's happening here," he said, shuffling papers as if that would somehow restore control. "There must be a mistake." I didn't flinch. I didn't smirk. I let him stew in the uncertainty. My calmness was part of the message. The quiet, unshakable confidence made him uncomfortable in ways words never could. "No mistake," I said. My voice was steady, measured. "Everything is exactly as it should be. You taught me that degrees don't pay bills. I've taken that advice seriously. And now, I'm in a position to make sure the business continues and thrives, even if you don't understand it. He opened his mouth, likely to protest, but I held up a hand. Save it, I said. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to run this company, and you're going to have to get used to the idea that I call the shots now. His face went pale. For a man who had always exuded confidence, who had made a career out of belittling anyone who challenged him, this was new territory. He glanced around the office like he was searching for a hidden camera, some trick, some loophole he had overlooked. There wasn't one. The papers in my hand were final. The accounts were transferred. The control was mine. What about my clients? He asked finally, his voice cracking just slightly. The anger, the panic, it all started bubbling to the surface. They've been with me for years. You can't just. I cut him off. I can. And I did. Because while you were busy mocking the next generation, I was learning, growing, planning. And now, I'm not just paying bills. I'm creating opportunities, expanding the business, making decisions that actually move us forward. He went silent. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to process the reality of the situation. I wanted to say more, but I knew timing mattered. I wanted him to fully feel it, to let the weight of his own words, those words that had haunted me for years, sink in. You bought it? He asked finally, disbelief in every syllable. Yes, I replied. I bought it. All of it. And you're going to have to answer to me now. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the office like a caged animal. I didn't flinch. I watched him, letting the silence stretch, letting him grapple with the truth. I could feel the satisfaction rising, but it wasn't smugness or vengeance. It was the quiet, undeniable power of accomplishment. The kind you feel when you've taken a challenge, absorbed it, and turned it into fuel. Then, he stopped pacing and looked at me squarely. You're serious. Completely, I said. I spent years preparing for this, learning everything I could about business, finance, strategy. And now, I'm applying it. You were right about one thing. Degrees don't pay bills, but they open doors. They give you knowledge, tools, and a mindset to make things happen. And that's exactly what I've done. He swallowed hard, his ego bruised, his authority shattered. He looked around his office as if it was suddenly foreign territory, like the empire he thought he controlled had quietly slipped out of his hands. And you're taking over completely? Yes, I said again, calm but firm. This is the reality now. And the sooner you accept it, the sooner we can work together, or at least coexist, without unnecessary tension. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. I could see the frustration building inside him, the anger, the disbelief, and maybe even a flicker of shame. That day, I realized that winning isn't always about shouting or confrontation. Sometimes, it's about planning, patience, and letting the other person fully comprehend the consequences of underestimating you. You've really grown, he said finally, voice low. It wasn't praise. Not exactly. But it was acknowledgement, the kind I had craved silently for years. I have, I replied. And I will continue to grow. And I'll do it with or without your approval. He slumped back in his chair, defeated, staring at the papers on his desk. The same desk he'd spent years behind, issuing commands and building a business, now looked like a reminder of everything he'd overlooked in me. I wanted to feel triumph, maybe even a little gloating, but I didn't. I just let him sit there, absorbing reality, because that was victory enough. Later, after he left for the day, I walked through the office, looking at the employees, the operations, the systems I now had influence over. It wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore. It was about responsibility, about ensuring that the business thrived, about turning years of humiliation into something productive, meaningful. And most importantly, it was about showing myself that I could take control, regardless of anyone else's doubts or negativity. By the end of that week, I started implementing changes, new strategies, updated systems, better management practices. Employees began noticing the shift. Clients noticed too. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I knew my dad was watching it all, unable to do anything but accept that the world he thought he controlled had changed. That's when it hit me fully. The satisfaction of proving someone wrong, of reclaiming your narrative, is indescribable. Not because it hurts them, but because it validates all the hard work, all the late nights, all the moments when you doubted yourself but refused to quit. And the best part? The guy who once told me degrees don't pay bills was now sitting in the passenger seat, watching me steer the whole thing. It all came to a head a few weeks later. I had scheduled a meeting with my dad in the main conference room. His office wasn't big enough for what I wanted to do. He arrived, looking uncomfortable but trying to keep his usual air of authority. I could see the calculation in his eyes. Was this going to be another confrontation? Another lecture about how I didn't understand business? I smiled, casually, letting him settle into the chair across from me. For years, he dominated that space. Every boardroom, every discussion, every dinner conversation. But now, it was different. I was in control. Before we start, I said lightly, I just want to say thanks. He blinked, confused. Thanks? For what? For showing me what I didn't want to become, I said. For motivating me, even if you didn't mean to. And, most importantly, I paused, letting my words hang in the air. For telling me, in front of everyone, that degrees don't pay bills. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak, but no words came out. The realization was slowly dawning. This wasn't going to be the usual exchange where he asserted dominance and I folded. This time, the power had shifted. Look, I continued, leaning back in my chair. I didn't respond that day at graduation. I could have argued. I could have gotten defensive. But I didn't. I let your words sit with me for years. And you know what? They did exactly what you never intended. They drove me. They pushed me to do better, to learn more, to actually understand what business, responsibility, and strategy mean. And now, I slid the folder across the table. He glanced down. My heart was steady, but my pulse thumped in anticipation. The folder contained the documentation, full ownership transfer, controlling interest, management authority, all legally binding. Now you get to experience exactly what it feels like to be on the other side, I said softly. You get to sit there, in front of me, realizing that your words didn't just fail to hurt me. They motivated me to surpass you, to do what you said couldn't be done. He coughed, shoving the papers away slightly, disbelief and anger battling in his eyes. You can't just. I can, I said firmly, because I worked for it. Every late night, every side gig, every bit of learning, every calculated risk, it all led here. This isn't luck. This is an accident. This is the result of taking your challenge seriously. He ran a hand over his face, frustration and pride mixing into something I couldn't fully read. For years, I had waited for this moment, the culmination of all my planning, persistence, and patience. And now it was here. You think this proves something? He asked finally, voice low, strained. Owning the company, that doesn't make you better than me. I leaned forward slightly. I'm not trying to prove I'm better than you. I'm proving that I can do it on my own terms. That I can take your negativity and turn it into action, into results, into success. That's all that matters. And yes, it's undeniable. There was silence. He sat there, eyes darting around the room, trying to find some foothold, some leverage. There was none. I held it quietly, confidently. Let him sit in the full weight of reality. Finally, he exhaled, slow, heavy. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, I replied. Just remember that your words have power. They can hurt, or they can drive someone to heights you didn't imagine. And maybe, next time, be careful what you say. You never know who's listening, who's learning, who's quietly planning. For the first time in my life, I saw him humbled. Not broken, not angry in a way that demanded retaliation, but humbled. He realized the scale of what I'd accomplished. And I didn't need a handshake, a hug, or an apology. The satisfaction of knowing I had turned his doubt into my power was enough. After the meeting, I walked through the office, feeling the shift in energy. Employees who had known me as the quiet, determined guy were now looking at me with respect. Clients were noticing the changes, the improvements, the vision I was bringing. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew my dad was watching it all, aware that his role had changed forever. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on the past 5 years. The sleepless nights, the humiliation, the grind, it had all led here. And as I thought about my graduation day, the words that once stabbed me so deeply, I realized something. Power isn't about proving someone wrong in public. It's about working quietly, strategically, until the results speak louder than any insult ever could. And as I poured a glass of whiskey, I smiled quietly to myself. I didn't need to say it out loud, but I thought it anyway. Degrees don't pay bills, right? I could almost hear him cringe. Almost.